Welcome to my channel. They laughed when she missed every shot, until Sergeant Richter found 5 perfect bullet holes hidden in the concrete wall behind the target. Casey Noland was supposed to be invisible, just another logistics worker in fatigues. But legends don't stay buried forever. What happens when the ghost everyone thought was dead finally steps back into the light? They laughed when I missed. I could hear the snickers even before the first shot finished echoing across the range. One of the younger recruits, tall and cocky, leaned back and barked. Did she even aim? Maybe she thought the trigger was a handshake. The laughter rolled in waves. I just stood there, silent. My rifle hung loosely in my hands as I looked past the paper target to the tree line behind it. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just waited. Sergeant Richter, the range officer, stepped forward with his usual bored scowl until he saw the line where the rounds had landed. He squinted, frowned, then barked, "Someone check the back wall." The silence that followed hit like a switch. Suddenly, the jokes died. The air got heavy. They didn't see it yet, but Richter had. My name's Casey Noland, 34 years old. Brown hair usually tied up under a cap. Eyes that see more than they let on. I'm medium height, average frame, what they call unremarkable. And that's always been the goal. I was assigned to Camp Forge, a military logistics base nestled in the scrublands outside Fort Iron Ridge. My role was listed as Support Tech, Tier 2. No combat designation, no tactical briefing clearance, no weapons certification requirements. Just maintenance logs, parts ordering, and routine gear servicing. The kind of job people walk past without a second glance. And that's exactly how I liked it. Every morning, I arrived on the dot. Not early enough to be noticed. Not late enough to raise a flag. Just there. I signed in, kept my head down, and did my work with methodical silence. Rifles cleaned. Optics calibrated. Supplies stocked. No complaints. No skipped duties. No socializing. The infantry recruits didn't notice me. Why would they? They were built for fire and thunder. Tight fades, swagger in their stride. Tactical gloves even in the cafeteria. They were preparing for war. I was preparing their spare batteries. To them, I was just another ghost in fatigues, elbow deep in grease and paperwork. Invisible, harmless, non-combat. And, if I'm being honest, that label kept me safe. Because the less they saw, the more I could keep buried. But every now and then, something slipped. Like how I field-stripped an M4 with one hand while checking the torque on a weapon's mount. Or how I re-zeroed a scope without ever peeking through it. Those who noticed chalked it up to a good memory. Some kind of savant thing. Logistics, they said, just had quirky types. They didn't see how I watched every drill. Not with idle curiosity, but with the eye of someone mapping kill zones. They didn't hear how I picked up stress patterns in footsteps, or the way my fingers twitched when someone mishandled a trigger. None of it mattered until that morning. That morning, when command decided even non-combat staff needed to pass a basic marksmanship test. New regulations. Readiness across roles, they said. It was supposed to be a formality. But when I stepped to the line and lifted my rifle, the jokes began. I could hear them behind me. She gonna hug it or shoot it? Bet she loads it backward. Hope someone brought a blindfold for that target. I didn't react. I adjusted the rifle's sling, clicked the safety, and took my stance. Functional. Unassuming. Passable. Sergeant Richter called it out. 5 rounds. 50 meters. Paper silhouette. Don't embarrass logistics. The first shot rang out. The paper didn't move. Laughter. Predictable. For more rounds followed, evenly spaced. Quiet. Unremarkable. Each missed the target. Or so they thought. I placed the rifle down and stepped back without a word. That's when Richter, bored and smug just moments earlier, leaned forward. Then walked. Then ran. Past the line, past the target stand, all the way to the solid concrete wall behind it. He stopped cold, bent low, traced something with his finger. Then, turning slowly toward the group, his voice came out like gravel. Someone get over here. All chatter died. The wall bore 5 holes. Clean. Sharp. Impact marks so tightly grouped, a poker chip could have covered them. Not scattered. Not wild. Perfect. 5 rounds had passed through the inch-wide gap between the paper target and its frame, without touching either. 50 meters. Barely 2 millimeters of margin. 5 for 5. That's when people stopped laughing. And that's when I knew my cover was over. No one said anything for nearly 30 seconds. That's a long time when a group of soldiers is used to cracking jokes faster than their rifles can cycle. Sergeant Richter stood frozen at the wall, one hand braced against it like he needed the concrete to steady his balance. He traced the grouping again with the tip of his pen, then slowly looked over his shoulder toward me. What, who? Noland, what the hell was that? I didn't answer. I just met his eyes and waited. Behind him, the rest of the logistics unit and half the combat trainees stood as if stuck in a glitch. You could practically hear the mental gears grinding, trying to reprocess everything they thought they understood. Private Layton, the one who had bet I'd missed the entire target, leaned forward to get a better look. No way. That's not possible. You can't thread shots like that, another said, voice barely above a whisper. Not without. I mean, who even trains that level of accuracy? Corporal Danner, who had been laughing the loudest, took a slow step backward. That's not just marksmanship, he muttered. That's something else. Richter strode back across the range, boots crunching sharp and deliberate. He didn't speak until he was face to face with me. You ever heard of someone named, I don't know, Whisper One? That made me blink. Not visibly, not to them, but inside, it felt like someone had just cracked a vault I'd buried deep years ago. Whisper One. It was a ghost name, an alias buried in files no one below level 5 clearance had access to. It wasn't even mine. Not entirely. Not anymore. I said nothing. Richter looked me over, then gave a tiny nod, like he'd seen this kind of silence before. He stepped back and gestured toward the armory. Go wait inside, he said quietly. You'll be contacted. No threats. No accusations. Just that. I walked off the range without looking back, rifle slung low, boots steady. Behind me, no one moved. Not until I passed through the double doors and out of sight. Inside the armory, I sat alone on a steel bench meant for gear maintenance, not quiet reflection. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled like gun oil and ozone. I didn't need to wait long. 17 minutes later, the door opened. A man entered wearing a jacket with no rank, no patches, and a badge clipped to his collar that didn't have a name. Just a black triangle with a silver slash. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't need to. Casey Noland, he said, his voice a mix of gravel and calm steel. Codename Whisper One. Presumed dead. Status inactive since Operation Silent Rain, Year 7. I didn't correct him. He looked down at a small data pad. Witnesses confirm 5 precision shots, threaded through a structural gap at 50 meters with 0 deviation. He lowered the pad and met my eyes. Do you know what kind of statistical probability that shot pattern requires? I wasn't aiming at the target, I said. His eyes narrowed. I was aiming past it, I continued. They were never the point. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. We've been looking for you for 5 years, he said. You're off-grid. No payroll, no exit paperwork. Your records list you as inactive due to mental health deferral after the Varden Ridge incident. Funny. We didn't think ghosts filled out transfer requests. I didn't, I said. I vanished. Voluntarily. Does it matter? He considered that, then nodded once. You hiding? No. Then why here? Why Fort Iron Ridge? Why logistics duty? Because this is the last place anyone would look, and the first place people stop listening. The man walked over and sat beside me, his boots tapping softly on the concrete. You've got 2 choices, he said, voice dropping to a near whisper. Come with me. Reactivate. We clean your file, reinstate your clearances, bring you back into the circle. And the other? You stay here. Fade back into obscurity. But you know that won't last now. Not after today. He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his slacks. They'll come. First to ask questions. Then to recruit. And finally to try and control. Your call. He walked to the door, paused, and glanced back. We thought Whisper One was a myth, he said. Now we know better. See you soon, Noland. And with that, he was gone. When I walked back out into the hallway, the world hadn't changed. But the way people looked at me had. The logistics team didn't meet my eyes. The combat trainees shifted aside. And somewhere near the edge of the training yard, I saw Layton point me out to someone and whisper 2 words I hadn't heard in years. That's her. They didn't even know what her meant yet. But they would. They started watching me. Not openly. That would have required too much honesty. But I could feel it in the pauses between conversations, the awkward silence when I entered a room, The quick shifts in posture when I passed too close. The ones who had laughed before now studied my every move. Suddenly, how I disassembled weapons wasn't amusing, it was unsettling. How I aligned optics wasn't quirky, it was clinical. How I moved, how I breathed, how I watched. The silence I carried had become a presence they couldn't ignore. They didn't understand what they were seeing. Not yet. But they were starting to feel it. Sergeant Richter didn't bring it up again. He just made sure I had unlimited range access and stopped assigning me to the more menial tasks. I still showed up at 0600, cleaned weapons, filed reports, logged repair orders. But now he let me run my own inventory checks. Now he nodded a little too formally when we passed in the hall. Someone had briefed him. Or maybe he'd just seen enough to know better. The whispers started 2 days later. She hit the back wall. No scatter. Grouped like one whole. I heard she used to teach advanced sniping. No, man. She was one. That last one carried weight. Because being one meant something at Fort Iron Ridge. It meant Tier 5 certification. It meant black entry ops and field deployments where extraction was considered a luxury. It meant being so good. Your name was only spoken when someone failed to match it. They didn't know the details, of course. That part had been scrubbed clean. They didn't know about Operation Silent Rain, or the hilltop farmhouse in northern Havre where I made a call no soldier should ever be forced to make. They didn't know what Whisper 1 actually stood for. But the tattoos were a giveaway. I caught Corporal Danner looking at mine when my sleeve rode up during maintenance. Just the edge of it, an inked silhouette of a raven perched on a cracked scope, flanked by coordinates that didn't exist on any public map. He looked away fast, but his face said everything. They'd heard of the Raven Watch. They just didn't realize one was standing 2 feet from their ammo rack. The following week, things escalated. The armory log showed a sudden uptick in late-night weapon checkouts, young recruits wanting more range time. The private training room started filling up after hours. Targets became more complex. Accuracy sheets got stricter. Someone had seen what real precision looked like, and now the bar had shifted. Then came the notes. At first, I thought it was just instinct. But after Private Rios dropped his kit near my bench and muttered, "Ma'am, I don't get how you compensate for lateral drift on microflinch at 60 meters," I realized something had changed. They were looking to me for help. I gave him one note. Just a sketch of a hand placement change and a breathing rhythm cue. He brought back a tighter group the next morning. The next day, another note disappeared into someone's locker. Then another. Soon I was giving out knowledge I hadn't shared in years. Not as orders, not as lectures, but as quiet guidance. The kind that comes from knowing the difference between textbook accuracy and field necessity. I wasn't trying to train them, but some truths just need to be passed down. Not through rank or curriculum, but through experience. Through scars. It was Private Layton who cracked first. He cornered me in the mess hall. Unusual, since he used to avoid me like I carried some airborne mystery. "I want to learn," he said. I kept eating. "Please." He wasn't cocky this time. He wasn't joking. His hands were steady. His voice was low. "What kind of learning?" He hesitated. "The kind that leaves 5 holes in a wall no one thought mattered." I looked up. "Then lose the swagger," I said. "And bring a pencil. You don't get to carry my secrets if you don't know how to write them down first." He nodded like he'd just signed a contract with something he didn't fully understand. And maybe he had, because I wasn't training them for scores. I was teaching them the kind of precision that saved lives. The kind that doesn't flinch under pressure. The kind that reads wind like a language. The kind that walks into an ambush and sees 5 ways out before anyone else knows they're trapped. I never told them who I used to be. I never had to. The way they watch me now, quiet, cautious, respectful, said everything. I wasn't invisible anymore. And honestly, I didn't know if that was a good thing. Because the more eyes turned toward me, the harder it would be to disappear again. And soon enough, someone higher up was going to ask the real question. Not who is she, but why is she here? And that's the one question I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. 2 weeks after the range incident, everything on the surface went back to normal. Which is to say, the mess hall still served eggs like rubber, the paperwork still piled up like sandbags in monsoon season, and the morning announcements still blasted from old speakers like someone trying to discipline the sun. But beneath it, everything had changed. Word had spread. Nobody ever officially confirmed anything, but soldiers don't need confirmation when they've seen truth in action. Whisper travels faster than orders. And in a place like Fort Iron Ridge, reverence is earned, not assigned. Recruits began adjusting their stances mid-drill when they thought I was watching. Instructors stopped correcting me on things I hadn't done wrong in the first place. And Sergeant Richter, he stopped assigning me anything at all. He just handed me the weekly task schedule and said, fill in where it makes sense. Even the base commander, Colonel Harner, gave me a tight-lipped nod one afternoon during range recon, though I knew full well he'd signed my assignment as support logistics, non-combat provisional. He'd seen the report, probably had a quiet call about it from someone higher up, maybe even higher than him. But none of them mattered. Only one person really understood what had happened. And that was the man who showed up 3 weeks later in a black SUV with no tags, no insignia, and no scheduled clearance. He stepped out wearing fatigues that didn't match any branch, gray-green hybrid gear that looked custom-issued, a sidearm low on his hip, gloves clipped to his belt, eyes that moved like they were always calculating exits. His name was Commander Victor Bray, and the moment I saw him, I knew I wouldn't be able to stay hidden much longer. He didn't ask for directions. He didn't wait for an escort. He walked straight into the weapons bay, where I was calibrating a set of recoil springs, and stood just inside the doorway like he already owned the place. You still like working alone, he said. I didn't look up. I still like quiet. He stepped closer. You always did. I finished threading the spring and locked the mechanism into place before meeting his gaze. Still sniffing around dead names? Bray smirked. Only the ones that turn out to be alive. Silence stretched between us. He didn't bother with pleasantries. We never did. He tapped the bench beside me. They sent me to verify. They didn't believe the report. I gestured toward the door. Concrete walls still standing. He shook his head. Not that. The part about you being here. Still active. Still yourself. I'm not active, I replied. I'm useful. There's a difference. His gaze narrowed. They want you back. I said no. They'll keep asking. I'll keep saying no. Bray exhaled, slow and steady. Whisper 1 doesn't just walk off the grid and become a crate counter, Casey. You vanished. That's not retirement. That's disappearance. I stood up and faced him. You want the truth? I said. I got tired of being a name that only mattered when someone else failed. I got tired of cleaning up other people's mistakes. I got tired of making kills that didn't fix anything. Bray studied me for a long beat. But the skills didn't go away. No, I said. They're just quieter now. He nodded. Once. And if things change, they won't. But he didn't believe that. And maybe neither did I. He turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. Someone's going to come. Someone who isn't polite. Someone who doesn't ask. Let them, I said. They'll find me exactly where I want to be. Bray's reply was soft. And what if they remember who you were? I smiled, not kindly. Then they do well to remember what I'm still capable of. He left without another word. That night, I sat on my bunk long after lights out, watching the faint glow of the moon cut through the barracks window. A part of me missed the shadows, missed the adrenaline, missed the clarity of it all. But another part remembered too clearly what that life cost. For now, I was still hidden, still quiet, still forgotten by most. But not all, because Bray was right about one thing. You can walk away from a name, but a legend? That always follows. By the time the 4th week rolled in, Fort Iron Ridge had a new kind of tension in the air. Not fear exactly. Not paranoia. Awareness. Like everyone was finally seeing their surroundings a little clearer. Like the comfort they once took in routine had been stripped away by 5 perfect bullet holes in a slab of concrete. No one spoke of it directly. No announcements, no policy changes. Just subtle shifts. Recruits stayed longer at the range. More of them requested time in the simulator. Fewer jokes got made about logistics staff, especially the quiet ones. But the real shift happened after dark. That's when the envelopes started appearing. No names, no insignias, just plain manila folders slipped under bunks or left tucked in lockers. Each one carried diagrams, shooting corrections, wind charts, tactical feedback on drills that no instructor ever mentioned during review. Each one was precise, personalized, deeply observant, and somehow, everyone who received one knew exactly where it came from. They didn't thank me. That wasn't the point. But they used it. Shooting scores climbed. Reaction times tightened. And slowly, the margin between average and elite started to close. They weren't learning how to be better soldiers. They were learning how to see. One night, I was returning from the maintenance bay when I spotted a young recruit, Private Jace Varn, standing alone near the observation tower. He was staring at the distance like the trees might answer questions he was too afraid to ask aloud. I didn't speak until I was next to him. "You missed left again." He jumped slightly, then looked embarrassed. "I was compensating for wind." "You were compensating for nerves," I said. He didn't argue. I handed him a folded sheet of paper. He opened it. 5 lines. No more than 20 words total. Breathing cycle. Grip retention. Sight picture delay. Mental override. Pause trigger break. He read them twice, then looked up. "This isn't in any manual." "No," I said. "It's not." He hesitated. "Why help us? Why stay here?" I stared out into the dark. "Because they need to remember." "Remember what?" "That precision is more than aim. It's a mindset, a language, a responsibility." He swallowed hard. "Did you really do what they said? The impossible shot?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. He nodded, folded the paper, and walked away with steadier steps than when he arrived. That was enough. A few nights later, someone slipped a piece of paper under my own door. One sentence. "Are you training them for a reason? Or are you preparing them for what's coming?" No name. No handwriting I recognized. But it chilled me. Because deep down, I knew the answer. And I didn't like it. Here are the 5 lessons I taught without saying them aloud. Lesson 1. Silence is not absence. It's readiness. Lesson 2. The most dangerous person in a room is never the loudest. Lesson 3. Precision is patience manifested. Lesson 4. Being underestimated is a gift. Don't waste it. Lesson 5. Some shots aren't fired to hit. They're fired to reveal. They weren't just learning how to aim. They were learning how to see the world differently. And if they learned those lessons well enough, maybe they wouldn't need people like me again. But deep down, I suspected they would. Soon, a week after Commander Bray's visit, a new pattern started to emerge. More black SUVs. No plates. No insignia. No record of entry. They didn't speak to anyone openly. They just watched. Sometimes from a distance, sometimes close enough to breathe down your neck without saying a word. Their stares lingered too long. Their boots never made a sound. They weren't observers. They were surveyors. And I knew exactly what they were surveying. Me. Which meant time was running out. I kept working like nothing had changed. Logged repair tickets. Replaced scopes. Ran diagnostics on malfunctioning range systems that hadn't seen updates since the last administration. But I also started prepping. Quietly. I rerouted one of the comms nodes. Just a fraction of a degree, but enough. I adjusted my bunk drawer's internal lining, foil layered with carbon mesh, perfectly cut to suppress signature. I accessed a satellite I hadn't pinged in years. The connection was slow. Cold. Like waking a sleeping beast. The confirmation code returned in 7 digits. KRK 9-214. My old cipher. Kraken 9. Whisper 1. It was like hearing your full name spoken by a ghost. Then came the message. A tiny slip of paper slid into my palm during morning check-in. No one saw who passed it. All it said was, "Your coordinates were never wiped." And below it, faint, ink barely legible, was the same set of numbers I'd had tattooed on my upper arm all those years ago. The ones no map recognized. The ones even satellite systems were told to ignore. The ones that pointed to a facility that didn't exist. At least not officially. Raven Watch HQ. My birthplace. And my grave marker. That night, I sat alone in the diagnostics bay, staring at a locked box I hadn't opened in 7 years. It was no bigger than a lunch tin. Marked O/R. Outside range. The last place they ever assigned me before I disappeared. The box required a biometric, a cipher, and a sound passphrase. I placed my hand on it, typed the code, and whispered, "All ghosts remember." The lid clicked open. Inside, a field tablet, a thumb-sized storage drive, and a single bullet, polished to mirror shine, marked with the symbol of Raven Watch. Below them, a patch. My patch. Kraken coiled around a rifle barrel. The tentacles shaped into a spiral of coordinates. I ran my finger over it slowly. I hadn't forgotten. They had. The next morning, Sergeant Richter tried to act like nothing had shifted. But I could see it in the way his eyes danced too quickly, how his clipboard trembled slightly when he called out assignments. He knew something was coming. So did I. By mid-afternoon, 3 logistics techs were called off base. Routine inspections, they said. By nightfall, 2 more instructors had been reassigned. Then came the lockdown. Drill simulation, they called it. I called it what it really was, containment. Someone at the top had finally decided it was time to retrieve Whisper 1. Not ask, not offer, take. And that's when I made the call. Just once. No words. Just the signal. The drive activated. A short pulse to the network. Encrypted. Bounced through 6 dead satellites and buried in noise. It would reach exactly one place. The only place that mattered. Wherever Commander Victor Bray was. Wherever the remnants of Raven Watch still lingered. They'd know what it meant. Because only one person in the world had access to that signal. The person they thought was dead. Fort Iron Ridge woke the next day to thunder. Loud, rolling, unnatural thunder. But there weren't any clouds. It wasn't weather. It was rotors. 3 twin-blade VTOLs hovered above the West Range perimeter before settling onto the tarmac, like vultures circling something already dying. No call signs. No transponders. No uniforms. Just a new level of silence. And that was when I knew this wasn't a recall. It was a capture. I was in the diagnostics room when they breached. 2 in front, 1 in the back. Silent, armored, visors down, carbines tied against their chests. They moved like people who'd studied everything about me, my rhythm, my blind spots, even the way I breathed. But they forgot one thing. You can't corner a ghost in a room she built herself. I activated the charge under the floor panel. It wasn't explosive, just a powerful magnetic surge that fried their comms and wiped every scan device within range. Their visors flickered. Their stances shifted. I was already moving. 1 twist, 1 disarm, 1 takedown. 3 seconds. 2 down. The third had the sense to hesitate. I don't want to kill you, I said, standing over the first man, who now lay stunned and coughing against the tile. You have no authority here. He didn't answer, just reached for his sidearm. I didn't hesitate. A shot to the arm. Non-lethal. Controlled. He went down screaming. And that was when I heard it. Not boots. Not orders. Just a voice. You always did like dramatic exits. Commander Bray stood in the hallway, hands up, no weapon drawn. I told them this would happen, he said calmly. I warned them. I lowered my pistol slowly. Who are they? I asked. People who forgot what it cost to make you. His eyes scanned the unconscious men, then settled on me. They weren't supposed to extract. They were supposed to test. Test what? I asked. If the legend was still alive. I scoffed. They could have just asked. They're not good at that, Bray said. But I am. He reached into his jacket and tossed me something. A new patch. The same Kraken. But this one bore a new emblem at its core, an open eye. Raven Watch is operational again, he said. You were the first. But you're not the only one. I caught the patch. Turned it in my hand. What's the mission? Observation. Reconstruction. Retaliation if necessary. Against who? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked past me, knelt beside the unconscious extraction team, and picked up one of their dropped ID chips. He scanned it against a device on his wrist. The screen blinked red. Not ours, he said. Not government. Not military. Then who? Someone who wants control of ghosts like you. I didn't speak for a long moment. Then, where do you need me? Bray smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not in the field. Not yet. We need you right where you are. Quiet. Unseen. Watching. I understood instantly. The best place to see everything is from inside the noise, pretending to be part of it. Still logistics. Still invisible. But now armed with something far more dangerous than a rifle. Purpose. Later that night, I stood outside the barracks and looked up at the dark, starless sky. I thought about all the years I'd spent pretending to be ordinary. The lives I'd saved. The orders I questioned. The shots I'd taken with no one ever knowing why. I hadn't lost my edge. I'd sharpened it in silence. And now, those who once hunted shadows were realizing something terrible. That the shadows could still shoot back. From the outside, nothing changed. Not officially. Fort Iron Ridge's drills resumed. Schedules remained posted. Meals were served on time. Orders issued. Compliance noted. The reports from that day's drill breach were quietly rewritten. Faulty sensors, unexpected systems test, no casualties. But inside the walls, everything had shifted. Because whispers are harder to silence than bullets. And now, people weren't just watching me. They were learning from me. Uninvited. Quietly. Persistently. A new generation of recruits started asking deeper questions about range conditions, about wind mathematics, about reflex drills that weren't even on the base's curriculum. They asked about pressure patterns in a trigger pull, about sound direction, about sightline variance in partial cover. I answered when I could, mostly in notes, sometimes in passing comments, always carefully, because I wasn't just building better shooters. I was building thinkers. And something else began to emerge, something no command manual could dictate. Respect. Not from rank. From recognition. It wasn't loud. It wasn't demanded. It came in the way soldiers adjusted their posture when I walked into a room. The way instructors began deferring to me when discussing firing lines. The way even hardened sergeants leaned in a little closer during my weapon maintenance lectures. They didn't salute, but they understood. The invisible one had become the compass. A month later, I got the next signal. Not digital. Physical. A single bullet slipped inside a weapons case. Polished. Marked with a single glyph, an X surrounded by curved lines, ripple patterns. It was a call sign. One that meant incoming operation. Deep silence. I knew what it meant. Someone was coming to test the waters. See if Raven Watch still had teeth. So I made preparations. I changed the structure of the nighttime drills. Made sure certain instructors got random reassignments to posts I'd quietly flagged as vulnerable. Fed technical advice to the armory crew on how to detect tampered ammunition. It was subtle, imperceptible from above. But to anyone watching from within, it became clear. Fort Iron Ridge had grown sharper. Less a training ground, more a proving ground. And that's when they sent her. She arrived under a fake name, Lieutenant Celia Ray. Too clean. Too perfect. Her posture was textbook military, but she moved like someone who didn't just follow procedure, she wrote it. And her eyes? Too still. Predators hold their eyes like that. We didn't speak at first. She joined the morning inspection crew. Took range time in the middle of off-shift hours. Asked questions, but only the kind that were answered in field reports. But I knew what she was doing. She wasn't here to learn. She was here to watch me. And I let her. Because the real game wasn't in outmaneuvering her. It was in letting her think she had me mapped. Letting her build a profile so convincing that when the time came, she'd base her moves off it. And when that time came, I'd rewrite the map. One night, I left a rifle case open in the armory. Just enough for someone snooping to peek inside. Inside was a disassembled precision rifle. But not mine. And not Raven Watch's. It was bait. 2 hours later, the case had been moved slightly. The chamber rotated one click. The stock adjusted just a hair. Celia Ray had taken the bait. Which meant she believed I hadn't noticed. Which meant I had her. And in this game, that was everything. Because the moment someone thinks they understand you, completely, predictably, definitively, they've already lost. The day everything broke open was unremarkable on the surface. Gray sky. Wind steady out of the southeast. Recruits were mid-cycle in range qualification. I was running diagnostics on a set of miscalibrated optics. Sergeant Richter had just sent someone to fetch more ear protection. Routine. Boring, even. Until it wasn't. Until Celia Ray made her move. She didn't storm in with guns drawn. That wasn't her style. She just stepped onto the range platform during a live-fire cycle with a clipboard in hand and a neutral expression that said, "Nothing to see here." Only I saw everything. The slight bulge under her jacket where the suppressed sidearm was holstered. The second shadow trailing her, another operative in disguise, this one posing as an ammo tech. And the third, a spotter, perched just beyond the perimeter fence, glassing the entire range with what looked like binoculars, but was probably something a lot more precise. They weren't here for observation. They were here for extraction. Or elimination. Depending on how I reacted. That was always the playbook with someone like me. Ghosts don't get the benefit of negotiation. They get options, follow or fall. But they had misjudged one thing. I wasn't the same weapon they'd once calibrated and pointed. I was something else now. Something that watched back. I walked calmly to the observation post and requested a maintenance override. The system buzzed. The cameras blinked. The range shut down under the pretense of a safety system reset. "Apologies," I called out. "We've got to run a recalibration. Everyone off the line." The recruits moved quickly, no questions asked. Only Celia stayed. She stepped forward. "You've changed protocol," she said. I didn't answer. She smiled. "Not friendly. You've known the whole time. I knew the moment your boots didn't match your gait." Her smile faded. "This could have gone differently." "No," I said. "It couldn't." She gestured to the ridge. You're already glassed. I know. You're surrounded. I know that too. And yet here you are? No weapon. I looked down at the cracked concrete beneath the firing line. The very spot where, weeks earlier, I'd fired 5 rounds no one could explain. That's the thing about people like you, I said quietly. You think precision only applies to bullets. You forget that timing is a weapon too. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I raised my voice just enough. Commander Bray now. The ridge erupted in motion. For shadows broke from the tree line, not theirs. Ours. Operators. Real ones. The kind with no insignia and clearance that made satellites blink. They moved like ghosts. Silent. Clean. Within seconds, the spotter was down. The ammo tech tackled. Celia tried to reach for her weapon, but I was already behind her. My hand closed around her wrist with surgical calm. Don't, I said. Not here. She froze. You think I've been waiting for orders? I asked. I've been preparing the battlefield. She stared at me, stunned, and I realized the truth. No one had ever played her game better than her, until now. Later, in the command annex, Bray and I stood over the surveillance feed. The would-be extraction team now sat bound in a secure bunker, awaiting transport. Bray handed me a sealed file. What is it? I asked. Everything we have on who sent them. And it's not good. Tell me. He shook his head. Not yet. But soon. For now, just know this. He opened the file just enough for me to see one page. A logo. One I hadn't seen in years. A black spade. Blood red eye in the center. Unit designation, Covenant Black. I closed the file. They still exist, I whispered. Bray nodded grimly. And they're recruiting ghosts. The silence between us was heavy. Familiar. What now? I asked. You stay here, Bray said. Train. Watch. Wait. And if they come again? Bray met my eyes. They will. I looked out the window, back toward the range. To the cracked concrete. To the ghosts that refuse to stay buried. There's a comfort in routine. A rhythm. Most soldiers cling to it because chaos waits just outside the wire. But for me, routine is camouflage. It's where I disappear. I still clean rifles every morning. Still inspect range gear with mechanical precision. Still nod politely at instructors who now address me with quiet deference. But beneath that routine, something else pulses. A network of signals. Hidden drills. Recruits I've selected, not by skill, but by instinct. People who ask the right questions. Who miss the target on purpose to see what happens when they adjust by feeling instead of formula. Those are the ones I mentor now. Not in classrooms. Not with rank. But with silence. And notes. And watching. Always watching. Covenant Black hasn't made another move yet. But we feel them. Like pressure behind a closed door. Like breath on the back of your neck before you turn. Bray feeds me just enough intel to keep my blade sharp, but not enough to dull me with politics. He knows better than to give me orders. Ghosts don't follow. We haunt. I still remember what I told Celia Ray just before she was extracted. You came looking for the shot, I said. But you should have been looking for what wasn't hit. She blinked, confused. I explained. The shot that mattered was the one I didn't take. Because restraint is a weapon too. She didn't understand. Not then. Maybe one day she will. Maybe she never will. Either way, it doesn't matter. I never asked for recognition. I don't want medals. Or citations. Or whispered legends. All I want is to protect the ones who don't yet understand how fragile everything is. How quickly trust shatters. How dangerous silence can be when it belongs to the wrong people. And how powerful it can be when it belongs to someone like me. I walk past the range at dusk, the sun casting long shadows. And I think about those 5 holes in the wall. Still there. Still perfect. Still impossible. But that's the thing about impossibility. It's only impossible until someone does it. Then it becomes memory. Then it becomes myth. And sometimes, it becomes a warning. Here's what I know. True mastery doesn't need applause. Real strength never demands to be seen. And the most dangerous person in any room is the one no one bothers to notice. I was never aiming at the target. I was aiming at the assumption behind it. And I hit it dead center. Because sometimes the greatest impact isn't where the bullet lands, but where it doesn't.